musicians do amazing things. We read little black dots on thin lines, and we can read that as a language. And then our brain transforms this red material into sound images in our head. And then we do yet another translation that to come close to projecting these sound images on our instruments, we find appropriate motions, which we practice incessantly to make them better and better and to come closer and closer to the image of the sound we have in mind. We practice and we teach, and both of them actually work together. And as we teach, we usually see the student only 1 hour a week. And so we focus on either a few places that need to be made better, or a few things that look awkward, or something new, a new bowing, a new fingering. And we rarely have time to talk about all the basics that go into making a very, not only beautiful, but also comfortable and healthy performance. So Scott Clarkstall, who is this wonderful cellist and fantastic teacher, my colleague and I, we decided to just do a series on the very basics of cello playing. And so I'm going to summarize movements of the right side of the body, the bow arm, the ones on the left side of the body, the left arm, and then how the arms and the body work together in a very systematic way. We are starting by sitting, and so the sitting, we hopefully get a chair that is comfortable for us. That is, there should be minimally a right angle between the pelvis and the thigh. If possible, the knees should be a little lower than we are sitting. This is very important because the legs are going to control where the instrument is. In German, it's called Kniegeige, which means knee violin. So imagine this is a violin, and your knees are actually controlling where it is. Now you can move your body forward slightly and back. You can raise your spine or drop it. You can move your head to see the members of your quartet, or you can turn around to see the conductor or the pianist. So all this is free movement. The neck of the cello kind of ends with the scroll of the C string somewhat behind your left ear. And the important thing about is that the left hand can feel very comfortable hanging on there. So there is room between the clavicle and the neck of the cello, because if it's the neck of the cello sits on the shoulder, then we would have to twist to play in the lower positions. The only other thing important is the height of the end pin. Now, the height of the end pin actually is a result of the length of the arm and the relationship to the whole torso. So to feel where it should be just about comfortable, I would put my middle finger on top of the bridge between the two middle strings and feel like I'm holding a bow. So I can rest very comfortably on there. And then you see that my arm is neither stretched straight, nor is it bent to the point where the weight of the arm is in the elbow instead of transferring to the middle finger. So this way I could be very comfortable and be a lot. Now we come to actually making the sound. So the sound is made by the weight of the bow arm and the momentum of the sideways motion. And naturally also the point of contact, because nearer the bridge it'll be a slower sideways motion, and as we go up it'll be faster. But the main thing is that we feel the weight of the bow arm as it pulls the sound out. This is very easy to feel on the frog. We cellists and the bass players have a problem that we need to transfer the whole weight of the whole arm also to the tip. And this is easily said and not so easily done. So you feel that like on a monkey bar, and you feel that the hand is falling towards you as you come on the frog. Now, if the bow is on the tip, then you have to really enjoy putting the arm weight even in this spot and not holding the arm up. But ideally, put it on a chair or something that can hold it, and feel how you actually put the full arm weight there. So to check the arm weight at every inch of the bow, probably the best way is to just do a very slow staccato and feel every inch. Am I resting my arm weight? Resting arm weight. This tells me now also how high my elbow should be, because if I do this, there is no weight here. If I do this, it's going to be pressed and not good. So I still full arm weight in the same. So that shows us a lot about the arm weight, the transfer of power and makes clear that the gravity works towards the body of the arm, and the sideways motion is against it and makes a beautiful sound. So not only do we have to watch the weight transfer from the bow arm to the string on one string, possibly every inch or centimeter from frog to tip, but also from as we change to different strings. So if we feel the middle two strings in our middle, then we can feel very comfortable as almost in a kayak if both arms are at a height where the elbows are slightly above the hands, because if we droop them, there is no weight here. And if we raise them too high, then we get a terribly pressed sound that we really don't want. So we find the perfect height, and now we are trying to do what we were told since we were very little, that the power comes from the back and from the center of the body. So as you put your bow on the two middle strings and you feel very comfortable, feel like the point of attack goes directly to the back of your spine, straight through your body. But now as I change to the upper two strings, it's a totally different feeling if I feel just as comfortable. Now I feel like the point of attack goes against my right hip and the right side of my back if I'm comfortable. Also, my head is coming in the way the vector goes, because this would feel quite uncomfortable if I did that. I'm back to the middle and I feel the center of my back. And now I go to the lower two strings, and now you see again how totally my balance has changed. My equilibrium is now that the vector of power goes this way through my body and ends up on my left hip and left knee. And so maybe you can go with me and feel how your back and your whole body is involved as you go from string to string, and feel as you would play on a different string, how comfortable you can make it for yourself. And now I'm going to do the geometry and show you a picture of the physics and the geometry of what we are actually doing with a design and a skeleton, the bones of a skeleton. This is Gretel, our studio skeleton, and she hasn't been vaccinated yet, so she has to still wear a mask. Gretel is wonderful because you can show how fabulously movable her shoulders are. I told you what a great joint this is. Then the hinge joint at the elbow, and her wrist is even working. She just doesn't have digits. But she can show you how her arm would function if she played a bow. So you remember that at about the balance point, there was a right angle here in the elbow. And then as we played to the frog, which we all don't believe, near the frog, this angle is more obtuse. Then it goes back to the right angle, and then it goes to the obtuse angle at about three-quarters of the bow. And then the most amazing thing, which we all didn't realize till we saw the geometry drawing, is at the tip, the upper arm comes forward and the elbow actually goes down. So it's none of this what we see very often, that we turn the arm and press down on the end. She's also wonderful because she can teach us all about gravity, because she's not holding up her arm when I put it out for a up bow. See how she is just dropping it beautifully against her body. No question, it's not falling on the floor. So Gretel is helping us with all these wonderful things, and we know what's on the inside of us too as we get to know her better. As we use the bow with our right arm, I'm going to talk about the different joints and segments of the right arm. So all movements start in the head because we want to move. Then it would go through the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, and the fingers. And I'm going to talk about each of these segments. The shoulder is one of the most amazing joints we have, because we basically can move it limitless. We can move it this way, we can move it this way, we can make it high or make it low, we can move it back and forward. So it's one of the most amazing joints in the whole body. And we use it unconsciously every day as we're walking, and the arm swings next to us. Now cellists swing their arm in front of themselves, which is also a very comfortable motion. And if you think of it, as we swing the arm out, it would like nothing better than to swing back. So there's actually an active and a reactive motion. And if you see on the bottom of this swing, there is a half circle. Now you can also see it. This would be a pendulum, right? And you see the half circle on the bottom of this pendulum, and it follows the law of all pendulums, where on the bottom is the highest velocity. There is zero velocity on each side of the pendulum. So this is what we are using in a medium slow to medium fast movement. So we throw the arm out, and it's quite a primitive motion, almost like a marionette, moving the arm from the body, and the elbow flips out and comes back. If we reach about this speed that I just had reached, it kind of gets very awkward because the arm is so long, it's such a big mass to move. So luckily for us, we have built in yet another pendulum. Namely, if I look at my watch and hold the elbow so it's tilted forward, I can create yet another pendulum. And we call this the forearm motion. And this is a much smaller mass. It again makes a half circle. It's just like the other one. And it again has the most velocity in the middle. So this is what we are doing with the forearm pendulum. Now watch that what I just said, forearm pendulum, and be clear that I actually lied because it's not just the forearm moving. You see a movement in the upper part of the arm as well as in the forearm. If that's not fast enough and we still want to go faster, then we can yet use another pendulum. Like if I shake my arm as if I was in the shower and I'm shaking off water, then I find a third pendulum from the wrist into the hand. Same laws of pendulum as the other ones. And it's for very fast motion. We also use it off the string. Then there is an interesting relationship between the upper arm and the forearm that we also use, and it's the seesaw. I don't think there's another expression for it. So if you hold your arm again, as you do for the forearm motion, and keep the hands straight, as you dip the arm down, it'll rebound. And you can feel it very clearly. It's another thing actually that the shoulder does. It feels like we are doing it with the forearm, but it's actually the shoulder that swings it back and forth like a yo-yo. It's another very, very good motion we can use. All these fantastic things are built in. Now, aside from that, we don't really spend our lives just on one string at a time. We do change strings, regretfully or joyfully. So to do it joyful, if we are near the frog and it's very slow, we use what we just did with the pendulum, but we add a movement. Or this. And if you saw a light on my elbow at this time, you would see is a circle this way or the circle clockwise or counterclockwise. And my elbow would make that motion as we do this. Even the circle is kind of interesting, even if you think a circle is the same old thing all around, but there is gravity in the circle. So if I do the counterclockwise circle, the gravity will be on this side. If I do the clockwise circle, imagine you're doing a tightrope, then it is very clear. Then the gravity is on this side. And if the tightrope is this way, you feel it. It's always against the ground, as gravity usually is. And now we don't do this only with the whole arm and at medium speeds at best. We do it at faster speeds, and then it becomes a very complicated circle because the elbow is going to be the fulcrum of it. And so we are actually circling the forearm around the elbow, again, clockwise or counterclockwise. And if you watch carefully, you can see that there's an opposite circle in the upper arm, and there is movement in the shoulder that you feel. And you actually also can feel that those muscles right here in back that we showed you on the picture, and feel how they are involved in this motion. So this is very hard to teach. And you're circling around the elbow this way and that way. The only normal motion we ever would do that's similar to this would be swinging a lasso, where you also feel that the upper and the forearm and the upper arm are independent and it's moving in the shoulder, so you can try that. There is a very small circle when we do it just with the wrist for. A very small one for the wrist change of strings. So these are the main motions. It's either pendulum or it's a circle as we change strings. Then we get, so I have talked mostly about upper arm and forearm. What does the wrist do? So some people say the wrist does a whole lot, and I think the wrist's main task is to stay loose and mobile. That's the main thing. It does very little, because any movement that the wrist will do will turn the bow hair in different directions and won't do any good to the sound. So but we do need the wrist, because if we have the bow in a normal way on the D string and we could, without moving the wrist, the tip will go up. If we did the same thing, don't move the wrist, the tip would go down. So what the wrist helps us to do is this tiny adjustment from tip to frog. Here it's slightly bent, and here it's slightly flattened. So the angle of the fingers is slightly flatter. But even this, if this is quite a simple movement, it's still complicated because it's not the same on all strings. So if I do the same thing that I just did on the D string, on the A string, the flattening of it will be much more pronounced. On the contrary, when I go to the G or C string, if I flatten it, the effect will be terrible, because the weight is going to my elbow and I need the weight to transfer to the fingers. So that means my fingers stay much steeper on the lower strings than they do on the upper strings for the very end of each bow. So that is basically all we talk about the wrist. And now we get to the incredibly complicated things about all these joints in the fingers and this wonderful possibility we have with our hands, which people pay most attention to. But basically they are the end of a chain that goes from the brain to the tip of our fingers. So there are two motions in the fingers that we need to learn separately. And one is easier to do, kind of thinking violin. So we are pulling the bow and we are pushing the bow. And if you look, hold the bow like this and pull, like a violinist would. They would do it this way. Pull. You see that the fingers are bending around this stick. Now, if you push and you don't let go up there, you see that the fingers are stretching. So it's pull, push, pull, push. And it's quite a force we get through this, which you can feel by holding the bow, because you almost can't hold it against the strength of this hand. So this is what we use as a sideways motion as we play. And this is not the only complicated motion. There is yet an even more complicated one that we can actually, just by adjusting the fingers, change the strings. The easiest way to feel it, if you put the bow right on the frog and just feel your little finger pushing and all the fingers letting go and pushing mostly with your little fingers, the other fingers come around and let go. And you see, you went from G to D by just this absolutely teeny motion. And this we can use if we don't, like if we have a slow change of strings, then we can do it with the whole arm with no problem. We just approach the new string and it'll be fine. But if we have some fast string change or something like this, it's very awkward to do with the arm. The whole body has to take this slack. So if you can do it with your fingers, it'll be unnoticeable, it'll be much easier and less strain on you. So to practice this, basically you stretch your fingers, you bend your fingers, stretch your fingers, and the thumb will be vertical when you stretch and the thumb will be horizontal as you bend the fingers. And in practical exercise, this would be on the tip is the furthest angle. We would stretch, bend, stretch, bend, and then maybe. Slur or go even over 4 strings and do it very gradually. Now we have talked about the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, and the finger motions. And all this time I've been holding a bow and never talked about the bow hold. And you also notice that I am not saying the bow grip because that scares me, because then you're going to grip the bow. And I only want you to hold the bow. The string is actually holding the bow and not we. And we just find a way to make our hand guide the bow as the string holds it. So one of the things that I really like to do is have the student or myself, anybody, hold the bow with the left hand and then stroke the wood of the bow with the main joints of the hand. So they feel like it's wonderful to feel the wood. Then the first finger will feel as it arrives around the leather, and it feels like it can easily hook around there. At that time, the middle finger is kind of on the very edge of the ferrule and the hair and can feel the suspending the weight of my arm. The other fingers aren't really doing a lot, except I love for my little finger to be able to go back and forth easily, behind and in front of the frog. Now, the thumb you can't see at all, and please don't let your student ever look at that bow grip. Show him bow hold. Show him in a mirror, because as soon as they do this, it'll be ruined, right? So I tell them at that point to tap the thumb and feel where it comfortably goes. And it's the easiest to see the bow hold when they actually hold the bow the wrong way, with the side up, so they can see their fingers. Because now they can see that the first finger, they can also feel, not just see, that the first finger, index finger, is getting most of the weight, and it can be balanced between the little finger and the index finger, and how easy it is to balance this. Then they see the middle fingers just slightly curved, and the main thing they see is the thumb. So the thumb, there is this myth going around that the thumb has to be bent at all times. And this is absolutely true for violinists, right? They have to bend the thumb because there's no other way. But we, as cellists, okay, we will bend it a little for a bow change, especially on the frog. But basically, our thumb isn't bent, because if we bend the thumb, it will hit the wood and it'll push, and the thumb push will be upward. This is where the thumb pushes if it's bent, right? It points up. And so the other fingers have to then press downward against the thumb pressing upward, which is not a happy family of fingers. So let's not bend the thumb ridiculously. And if possible, check if there is enough room between the leather and the start of the frog to actually put the thumb slightly through the bow, under the stick, and that the thumb, the bow rests on the right side of the nail more than on the tip of the thumb. And you can have your student do this. And it feels really good also when you do it and then very gently draw. And let them see in the mirror how beautiful their hand looks and how there is a little space between these fingers, and the string is holding the bow, and he's just enjoy moving it over the string. Now I'm going to demonstrate the pendulums, the circles, and all the motions we have talked about in the different joints with an example of Bach's Prelude in G major. On the second page, you recognize it, I hope. And I'll start with the whole arm motion, circles, down bow and up bow with the whole arm. Or up bow. So at this slow tempo, it's the whole arm moving, and I'm using the weight here or the weight there to bring out the lower voice that Bach moves. Then I could do it faster with the circles around the elbow, which would be like this. Or opposite. Or I can slur them, and if I slur the two circles, this circle and this circle, my arm will actually form an 8 on its side or an infinity sign. So as I slur, you see this circle, this. As the motion gets faster, we just make a smaller infinitive sign. Or I can combine and do the 8 plus an extra circle, and this part of the 8 also with an extra circle, which would be basically too slurred to separate it across two strings. So this would be like. So you see the A, the the circle, this circle. And so on. And I think one other one we could use would be the bariolage, slurred bariolage, where we can use the seesaw plus the finger motion. So you saw that I used this motion, and particularly out here, as we come nearer the frog, it's more the windshield wiper motion between the index finger and the, which we would use for Brahms, where we have 9 of those bariolage figures. So for the ones near the frog, we can't use the seesaw. We just use the windshield wiper here. So one of the typical bowings would be long, short, short, or short, short, long. You can go about it either way. So we have. And musically, you can think long, short, short, or you can think short, short, long, short, short, long. So a pick-uppy or by the bar makes a difference. And it's a wonderful bowing because you can see the whole arm go, the forearm doing the short notes, the whole arm go, and this time the whole arm moving when we are back, especially in medium slow tempo. But it also occurs when we play fast, it just shrinks. Then another one that we use all the time is a dotted rhythm. So that means we go stop, pick up, stop, pick up, which is called a hooked bowing because we hook the pickup to the new note onto the old bow. Or we can do it back and forth for a very short staccato, or opposite. This time I moved my fingers forward. Or I can move my fingers backward. Or I can wander the bow. Or I can do it at the same place. And they all will come out. Then there is a really nice dotted rhythm we can do by retaking for a gentle melody. Which lets the long note ring better than if we stayed on the string. So we have it ring. And it gives us a wonderful control over the landing of the bow after we make this tiny oval in the air with the hand, with the arm really. So at any part of the bow, should we be able to land up or down bow on a tangent like an airplane lands, not like a helicopter crashes. when we play or teach spiccato, we actually use the same rules we did with the pendulums before, except the bow loves to jump. This is much easier than drawing a beautiful straight legato. So for a slow to medium spiccato, we use the whole arm pendulum, and we don't have to worry about the bow change. Now it's starting to get a little laborsome with the whole arm, so we know we have yet another pendulum to go. So from here on, we can play back and forth spiccato. We can also, a very good way of freeing up the arm is ricochet bowing, going. As many as you like to, and it's always in the ricochet, in the coming back, is where the elbow plays a huge role, because this is where we turn the hand back and forth. It doesn't matter if it's, or if it's. Now I just want to mention the typical ways we use bowing. We name bowings. So we name things legato. So legato means put together. And if we sang and we would say, what does the legato sound like? Then we would say it's a vocalise, like we go, ah, and we should not hear any consonants or barely any, and one note should flow into the other. There's a wonderful French expression, son filé, which means spun sound. So what do we do for this legato? So we play a bow, and we change direction of the sound, change the bow as intimately as we can. So what really happens is, I checked this on a computer, is that we use the shoulder joint goes first, the forearm comes, the hand finishes the stroke, while actually the upper arm already goes in the new direction. And it's a little bit like you're moving a scarf. The scarf is still going this way, while your arm is already going the other way. So you're making a scarf out of your arm to play a beautiful legato. Then we call something detaché, and nobody knows what detaché means, because it says detached, and we don't know from what detached, where and how. And so, so I think of it as a part of like rhetorical speaking, like that we can hear every single syllable. Like, for instance, in English, it would be legato to say, how are you? While in German it would be, wie geht es Ihnen? So there are all these pronunciations in between. And so I think detached is like, wie geht es Ihnen? So it's not that it's wie geht es Ihnen, that would be staccato, but it's pronounced and there's diction and it still makes a melody. So ideally, I think of Amanda Gorham speaking, and every word she pronounces, and I mean in a declamatory way, so you feel every word is like a crystal, And it leads to like a crown when you get the sense of her sentence and of her poetry. And that's, I think, what we can do with diction with our bow. And that has to do a lot how we change from one note to the other. Namely, with accents or so all these expressions we get with the so-called Detaché bow, which is really not detached, just a more pronounced or less pronounced bow change. Then the other ones are staccato, and staccato is just simply how much do you kill the ending of the note. Everybody would say it's a how much would chuck chuck, especially the chuck chuck would be with a stop on the end, or do you let it ring more? The other marking we hear quite often is Martelé. Martelé means hammered. And hammered happens very rarely in cello playing. So one of the few examples I can think of is Beethoven A major sonata, where the piano plays drum, dum, drum, dum, drum, and we go. Where we actually hammer. Or the Martelé in the Schumann concerto. And you heard that in the Schumann concerto, I really let it ring. So that's my choice instead of. But in the Beethoven, I probably would keep it a little drier. Depending also how the piano sounds. And I think those would be doing most of the normal string things that we encounter, except then collet bowing, which means we also play with the wood of the bow, which is not very difficult. It still follows the same rules of the arm. And I think we now should go to the left hand. The left arm has the same joints as the right arm does. So there is the shoulder. It's very, very important. It's incredibly just as mobile as the right shoulder. And there's the elbow that will transport us, and then the wrist that will adjust, and the fingers, which have to be flexible and happy on all of these places, all across the fingerboard. And so the most amazing thing you can imagine is that a cellist really knows all these places on the fingerboard. So there are the 4 strings, and right across are all these places where we play notes. And we should know all of them and be very comfortable. Like Dennis Parker used to say, we could go to sleep on each of them. And now what's across from it? Now, we talk about positions. That means we move the hand into different parts of the fingerboard. But position is not a good word, because if you just think, we call it first position, which is right around this place on the cello. And that first position, if you pluck here and there, it feels about as different as if I put a different pair of shoes on. Not to talk. Even from the little finger to the first finger, the change in the arm and the shoulder, or is enormous, not to talk. A first finger in thumb position on the C string and one on the A string. The whole arm, the shoulder, the ankle, everything changes completely. Not to talk if we actually move around fluently, right? So we try to make each finger as comfortable as possible. That is, in teaching first, we establish so-called position feeling. Now, if you look at the hand from an angle, just as a hand normally is, the fingertips are about nowhere, anywhere, a straight line, right? No matter how I shake them, they won't make a straight line. The strings, however, make a straight line. So we have to train these poor fingers that would like to be in all different lines, to be in a line, to be lined up. So we line them up in few basic positions. The one would be a whole step, half step. Or half step, whole step. Or whole step, whole step. Or, and that's pretty much the most typical positions that we have to teach in different places in the so-called neck positions, where the thumb is behind and presses a little bit with the first and second finger. These fingers form kind of a grip. If it presses with the little finger and the ring finger, it becomes a total cramp, because then all the fingers are pressing, and we don't want that. So the further we go up now, at this part, the thumb doesn't press anymore. And here the thumb can come along or stay, but for sure doesn't press against the little finger, because otherwise we have this same problem that we were talking about with the right hand. If the thumb presses, the other finger has to press twice as hard, because they fight each other. Then these patterns go till we get into so-called three-finger positions, which would be roughly, we used still the fourth finger to C sharp probably, and then the three-finger positions would be and probably already thumb position. So now the three-finger positions are these transitionary positions where some people like to take the thumb up, especially smaller hands, and larger hands rather have the thumb still behind. And either one is equally good. There is no a better one or worse one. Then we are in the so-called thumb positions, where the thumb replaces the nut of the cello. Here we get the fifths, because there is this piece of wood where we tune the cello. Now, if we put the thumb we get the same as the nut, and then we can play basically with the violin fingering above the thumb, because now we can do whole step, half step, or half step, whole step, or half step, two whole steps, or all whole steps. And that's basically the patterns that we use in thumb position, and except that we are then going to transpose them and not just do them in one position. When we shift we are going again to create a straight line along the string. And so there is a very active motion in the shoulder. It describes a circle as we do this, and a circle as we come back. And the elbow extends like the right elbow extended as we went to the tip of the bow. So we are going to start with small shifts. And the first thing would be that we actually dare to put another finger in the same place where we were. Then we move the same finger in a new dip. So already here we can learn that we can move in whole steps and half steps. At this point, the fingers are not pressing down, the thumb isn't pressing down as we do harmonics. So it helps greatly to loosen up the pressure on the string while we move. And we can do, like, as you teach your G major scale and you remember that the kids or any beginners have a problem going for the last 4 notes and again coming down from in this case we call it fourth position to first position. So if they first feel this shift, then we can add a half step or a whole step and add another whole step. And then have them play the end of the G major scale. And it will feel like it's an easy thing because they have done it, feeling no hindrance and not squeezing. We then can go to larger shifts, like and it's very important that they feel the slide and actually make it audible first, so that the ear guides the finger to and feels the arrival at the new thing. And we can even go further. To make sure they feel also comfortable. Probably it would be a good idea to have them find this position just as well. And first, feel them move the thumb into the new harmonic position, and then get rid of fear of heights by actually playing something way up there. Because why not kill that fear of heights right away instead of thinking, oh my God, this is unknown territory that we'll never conquer. Now we have to do it with real notes. So as we play real shifts, I call them, Starker called them, anticipated and delayed shifts. What it really is about is which finger does the sliding if we change fingers. So if we go from a B to a G, we could go, and that would be an anticipated shift because we slide on the previous finger and arrive on the new finger, and it will be same on the way down. Or we can do a so-called delayed shift, that is, we do most of the slide on the arrival finger, which would be. It also makes a difference which direction we are going. Like for the very large slides, you notice that there is actually quite a turn in the body from this side to this side. So it would be very, very unpleasant if I play. Would be very unnatural, while this feels much better. It feels now both arms went in this direction if I slur on down bow. If I slur on up bow, it feels quite different, because this motion makes me turn this way, and this motion actually is contrary. So this arm goes down while this arm extends. And that we very often check on that as we play, like a pickup feels more natural than. So it makes a big difference in how we approach a phrase, a bowing, a beginning, in which direction that both hands work and coordinate together. Then the other question is, where is the time going to be taken? Obviously, we cannot arrive and leave at the same time. So there is time in between. And is the time taken away from the previous note and we arrive on time, or is the time taken away from the arrival note? And both come, it's up to us to see what we think would be the right thing for this particular spot in the music. Especially as we change bow, it's even more critical, because then you hear it clearer. So I took all the time from the note before, or I can take part of the slide on the new bow. So I take a little time away from the note before and a little bit from the arrival time. And both are beautiful, and it depends again on the music. Like you could think of the Schumann fantasy piece, you could do with anticipated changes, which would be. So I took the time always from the note before, or I can do a delayed shift. Whereby I would take always the arrival note from which I would take the time. And you can do a combination. Most shifts, I think, are actually a combination of the two. And we try basically to imitate singers. Would they go da-dee, or would they go da-ee? And according to that, we would choose how we feature the shift. The Dupont brothers basically established the standard fingering for scales. And the standard is that we play 2 octaves, and on the 3rd octave we land with the 3rd finger. So if we played a D scale, we would play. And now, and end on the 3rd finger here. And then in case we play 4 octaves, we would go from here and use the same fingering we just used twice, which works perfectly if there is a stop, yam, da 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 dum, da 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 da, nothing wrong. But quite often we have long runs that don't have a stop on the tonic. And in this case, I find it better if we not finish the third octave with 3, but just keep going, which would be a scale, any scale on the A string, going. So the pattern of movement would be slide hit, slide hit, slide hits. On each one, which makes a very fluent movement. On the way down, we have a choice of doing the anticipated or the delayed shift down. So we can do which would be the anticipated slide. The first finger slides, the second finger hits. Or we have which we use quite often for very legato singing phrases, so we don't have the hit in the middle of it, unless we want that. Then I recommend that we do the same thing, because this just practices 1, 1, 2 basically the whole time, except for the last 1, 2, 3. So I would recommend that we do a few more scale fingerings, which aren't normally used, and practice the other fingers. Why not? So let's do 2, 4, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3 forever. Or again, with the delayed shift on the way back. And it helps us to get very comfortable with second and third finger. And then, especially for my colleague, he loves to use his fourth finger, which is excellent. So it practices 3, 4. And the last scale that would be nice to do for a triplet type run is to do 3 notes in one position. So if it's in major, it would be. In the minor, it would have a different pattern. So I think if you would practice these different 4 scales and do maybe it, actually, the more you do it, the shorter the time you need to practice it will be. Maybe it starts out with 15 minutes, but I think you could cut it down to 7 to 10 minutes and still have done something for each finger and each shift that is actually possible at this point, except disjunct shifts. So arpeggios. Arpeggios, I like to start like the last Popper etude. Do you remember? So what it does, it puts my hand almost like a pianist. I don't have to press down the notes because I'm playing all harmonics. And I still feel the formation of the arpeggio sound as if I was a pianist. If I this is a normal major chord, and if I go down, so I have the fourth and the sixth. Again, I feel a whole a chord, almost like I'm playing piano. Then I can add on lower notes. Or minor. So I can add on more notes as I go down and complete the triad. Also very helpful is to practice diminished chords, which are relatively easy on cello because the interval gets smaller, but it's still always a minor third. And then we have two major fingerings for major and minor arpeggios, and one is where the thumb plays on each tonic. So thumb, thumb. And the more used and a little bit more comfortable fingering is shifting after the tonic to the first finger. This one we use much more often. In major and minor. And these are the main fingerings I think we use for major and minor arpeggios. And diminished chords can take us chromatically up to enormous amounts of them. So most people are really afraid of thirds, and thirds lie really quite well on the cello. I think much easier than on violin, where they have to do these fingerings. And we have the tonic, the actual scale on the bottom. Will be a C scale with the fourth finger that we do, and then we add the first finger on the other string. Now, we make ourselves comfortable and just bring the first finger over to the upper string. And then the same thing happens for the upper tetrachord. So the basic pattern for major thirds is for the major third a closed position, for the minor third an open position. And it's close, open, open, close for both tetrachords equally. So we all have examples like that. In Bach and everywhere. I mean, these thirds come everywhere. In some position, people think, again, it's hard, so I'm going to do it in D, and I would recommend doing it in D because we have more harmonics. So this time the second finger will play the scale, and the thumb will play the upper third. Again, we'll go and play the same noodle, and we'll reward it because there is the third. Then we take an open position. Same one step higher. And a close one coming up. So that gives us the lower tetrachord. And then for teaching, I would recommend that you don't go up, even if it's the same pattern, but it's very close, and just go up by half step or whole step as you wish to E flat the next time. And then F and so on, whatever, E or F or whatever, and make that quite comfortable for the student. Now I find when we think of thirds, of moving the fingers closer and wider, that it can be quite laborsome and uncomfortable feeling, while if the arm helps to transport the major third to the minor third, if you watch carefully, if we do the minor third, the middle finger is kind of square to the string, almost at a right angle. While if we play a major third, you see the second finger went up a whole step and the whole hand seems more slanted, which is very comfortable. Both of them are comfortable. But if we use the arm motion, for that, and then opposite now, we'll go from a slanted position to a closed position, and the thumb is going to do the whole step. It becomes kind of almost a pleasure. And as you go from one to the other, be sure to release while you're sliding. So it feels weight, slide. Now you can add the fourth. Which will give you the fingers for the fingered third. Then we have to practice just this, which is the same motion we did for a whole step, but just we let the hand go for a third. And we do. And we can play. And then transpose it to E flat and do a wonderful proper etude, number 9. When we did the some position patterns and practiced them in one position, I was saying we should also transpose them. So usually, for some position, we are basically between this, maybe to the D, but that's the normal, most normal thumb position. Once in a while, we also play down here. So if you are pretty comfortable between the two A's with maybe a couple surrounding notes, I think you should be pretty much set up for a lot of music. So maybe first thing would be that you take all the A major scales, all the transformation of the A major scale through the octave. With this exercise, you actually also learn thirds, because we went as we play that scale. We also learn octaves, which is at the end of each scale. And then all we need to practice is do the octaves, maybe first feeling again the whole motion and then coming back to the single motion. And then filling it in. Again, release after each octave as you slide. Or as you play more intervals. Or going up a step each time. So that would give you a pretty good idea that you can do just about most stuff up there. Sixths are the most pleasant thing, because sixths use the longer finger for the lower note. So it's not like thirds where we have the shorter finger on the lower note, but we have then in a very normal position and another normal position for the first tetrachord, and again it's the same thing. So open, it's the same pattern as thirds naturally. So it's close, open, close, open, close, open, There are all kinds of fingerings you can use for thirds, for sixths. That is, you can play the same finger on the bottom. And these make very nice sounding thirds because they're smoother to play. I call them the lazy type of sixth. You can also just open the fingers and close the fingers as for. And again, you can practice this with 2, 3. And if you're very conscientious, practice it with thumb and 1. Because we need that, especially for things like that when they come in the literature. that's pretty much all I have to say. Oh, I forgot to talk about the lazy thirds, because they are particular pleasure. So instead of doing all these complicated things I told you about the finger thirds, we could do also just add a finger for the minor thirds. So instead of playing and changing the hand position, add the third finger. Take it off, add it, which is very pleasant to play. When you talk vibrato to people, they usually, everybody says something else. Some people say you do it with your finger. Some people say you do it with your wrist. Some people say you do it by turning the ulna and the radius and do this. And everybody, basically, even Mr. Gingold said, I won't touch vibrato with a 10-foot pole if it's okay. So what we usually do, we play and we vibrate, and our students see us vibrate, and then sometimes, oh great wonder, they start vibrating. And we couldn't be more joyful because, hooray, what great teachers we are. If it doesn't work, it's not so easy. So I'm pretty sure it's not, now action starts in the fingertips and goes up. I'm pretty sure all actions go from the brain through all the joints into the fingertips. So I'm pretty sure it's the same with vibrato. And we need to find a kind of a pendulum that perpetuates itself, because we can't possibly make each vibrato motion separately initiate above or below or whatever you think it should be. So we need to find a pendulum motion, and the one I found the easiest to feel is the same seesaw we were talking with the right arm, which is basically a very loose shoulder motion that moves the upper arm and the forearm, both. And the easiest for me to find it is around fourth position. You can even have the feeling that you just hit a little bit. I know that most people say this, but this, when I do this, this is a biceps motion. I'm pulling and pushing from the biceps. And I don't think, I mean, it's sheer luck if it turns out to be a vibrato motion, because it's not the same. When you vibrate, you don't feel the biceps going out, and there's no way. So to learn it, probably I would suggest that you first teach this seesaw motion and make it as comfortable as possible. Find different ways, even different places of the thumb. And where does it feel comfortable? And then put a finger on a harmonic, because again, we are not pressing down, so we are not doing something like this. Switch fingers. And then put a little pressure on and try to keep the same motion. Again, I would practice it on harmonics all the way over the cello, because we tend to and it's very, very relaxed up here instead of any of that which people tend to do. They also say it's exact same motion in the I mean, they all will demonstrate a beautiful vibrato here and then say it's the same all over the cello. I don't think so. For me, it feels quite different in different places of the cello. It also feels better if my fingers are kind of relaxed and long instead of very curved, which tends to make me cramp in here. So as Navarro said, after he talked after playing vibrato, he has a beautiful vibrato up here and a kind of a turned vibrato there. And he says, well, teach it, bonne chance, good luck. So we have spoken about most of the basic motions of the right hand, the left hand, and we already touched very much that we turn the body when we go up here, or it will be very uncomfortable if we turn this way. And we have talked about the power coming from the back. Now we have talked about it as we feel the weight coming down, and as we saw on the picture of the back, which seemed one big thing to us, we found different parts of the back that we use for different things. Like when we play on the A string, we feel that part of the back, none of the other parts of the back. When we do this, we feel this part of the back, and not really anything of this. When we move our arm in a circle, and this is both arms, if you swing both arms, so that the shoulder blades come together as you go back, and that the shoulder blades go around as we come to the front. This movement is a movement we use a great deal, and so I found these new muscles that are on this beautiful poster, which do a lot of that work, and it's not the trapezius, which is the enormous muscle thing that we can pull the shoulders up and down, or the dorsal that holds up our rib cage, but it's actually a pair of small muscles right behind the arm, right in there. And if you, either way, just feel as you swing the arm backwards or out, you feel it's like fingers going around between the large muscles that do unbelievable amounts of work. And I think that's also part of the back that is very, very helpful on both sides. I mean, in shifting, because it makes this circle in the arm, you can feel it really working if your shoulder is free and you're not holding it. It's for every circular movement, and especially if we play on the C string, when we need that to feel like, almost like there is a walking stick we can lean on. And the bow change here really is, you can really feel the counter pressure here against the bow. So that's one thing to consider. The other one is the direction of the music. So, for instance, as you play the C major courante, we have so we can play it like this. And not move the body, and we can manage. I mean, we'll manage one way or the other, but it's not terribly pleasant. But if we start, we are starting here, middle strings, now the lower strings, now this motion. We'll just bring the bow back to the A string with no effort whatsoever, and all it is a turn of the spine on the pelvis, right? So enjoy doing this, or there are so many places like this. The whole thing with body movement is about equilibrium. We want to be like good ballet dancers are, always wonderfully in equilibrium. So if we go on a very slow bow, with a crescendo to the tip, it's a great effort. But if we go with the same slow bow with a crescendo to the tip and use our body, so we use the bow against the cello. It is actually feels like swimming. If you do this and you push the water, it'll put you in this direction. The water doesn't put you in this direction as you stretch out your arm, right? So this would be what you would feel in water. This is what you would feel if you pushed something and it wouldn't give. And so the counter motion in all the time, particularly. So here, I have the cello over here. Now I have lots of bow and lots of power for the 16th. And if I go, now I'm totally out of whack and have no power whatsoever and desperately press on those. And also feels very awkward because the whole body is like with a screw in the middle. So this you might use. Momentum as we slur one note to the other. The easiest is we can feel our arms swinging again against the string and feel very comfortable and could do it for hours, which is the whole idea, that we never get tired. We were talking in the beginning that the head needs to be free. And it's really, really important to realize how that we have two vertebrae that are really important. The one with the quartet that you can look around and give a small hint. This is when we are going to start together. Or the large one where you can turn all the way around easily on the atlas, which is the big bump back there. And you can do a much larger motion. Much larger motion. And it's wonderful when you feel that your head actually can go back, because so we get a chance to do this. And so this would be really important for one of the places where it's really important if you are the one who gives the sign for the beginning of the Saint-Saëns concerto. So which would be that you go a large head mode. In this case, we think two to the beat. Dum, da 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 dum, da 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 da. So in tempo of this would be too small a motion. Dum, da 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 dum. It would disturb the whole thing. But as we think the large two, we need the whole head going dum, dum, and 1, 2. So now the head goes down after you check that the conductor is looking. It goes down, then we get ready, up and down for the beginning. Otherwise the conductor won't know what you're doing and the pianist won't. So, and it's difficult, you have to practice it because the up of the head is a down bow. So that's not quite easy to do. So it's down, up, down, for the syncopation entrance. And the same, the head also helps us to maybe look differently at different phrases in music. Like, when do we feel something in 4, in 2, maybe a whole bar in 1? And if you hum it and conduct it or move your head while you're playing, it can help tremendously. But we all agree that we would play the beginning of the A major Beethoven in 2, yeah? Da, di, di, da, di, da, da. So we can play. And it's not bad, it's passable. Not very interesting, but passable. Now, alone, the second bar, how will it sound if I feel it make my head go in 1? If I go 1. Now, instead of going in 2, if I go in 1. This invites the piano to come in, but if I go, I'm done now, you do whatever. You see that it can help us greatly with phrasing. And the same is with follow-up motions. So, like if you play slow movement Haydn concerto and you play, you may play like an angel, but it won't feel like you play like an angel, because you're not feeling bom, bim, bom, bom, bim, bom, bom. So the follow through and the time you take in the pause for setting up the new phrase will make it feel very organic or awkward or okay. You know, okay is not bad. We are often very glad if we do something okay. And the last thing I want to mention is that we are supposed to spread joy as we are playing. We are playing usually wonderful music that we love, we have worked on it, and we want to share it with somebody else. And so, but then we get nervous, and the trouble is that as we practice, we tell ourselves every day, hours at a time, this wasn't good, I need to do this better, and this was horrible, I need to do that 10 more times. And so we go through life telling us that. Then we are supposed to walk on stage and say, we are the greatest, you need to listen to us, right? So I really want you to at least say every hour once, wow, that really sounded great what I just did. And I can't wait to play this. And then go in the hall and be sure to always be in the hall and make the room your home. When John Cage was in Bloomington, he said, I'm always nervous, no matter if I play or if I play my radio or I've played 40 seconds of silence. I'm always nervous and I need to take. So I go in the room and I lie on the floor and I do a somersault, and then I'm ready for whatever comes. So be ready for whatever comes and make the stage your home.